Hey. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Act 378 Subcommittee of the DD Council. We apologize for the delay, but we will try to make up the time and be finished by noon. We will start the meeting with welcome introductions and meeting protocols.
Sure. Do you want me to take roll first? Make sure we have a quorum.
Yes, please.
All right. Ms. Banks,
Present.
Ms. Bazile,
Present.
Ms. Eagley. I see her. I just can't hear. Ms. Eagley. Are you able?
Present, Mr. Britton.
Excellent. Ms. Hagan,
Here.
Dr. McKee, Ms. Polizzola,
Here.
Ms. Tarver. All right, you have 5 and a quorum.
Okay. Meeting protocol,
Meeting protocols, if you want, I can run through those really quickly.
please.
So just as a reminder, same meeting protocols that we have for all of our meetings. If you are a committee member and you're participating via Zoom, make sure that your camera is on and you can unmute yourself whenever you talk. We have to have your camera on to make sure you're counted towards the quorum. Keep muted unless you're called upon by the chairperson. Electronically raise your hand to request that the chair recognizes you to speak. Once you're recognized to speak, you can turn your microphone on and then turn it off once you're done. Guests that are participating via Zoom, you can raise your hand to speak and staff will go in once you're recognized by the chair and unmute you, and then you will be able to speak that way. So just electronically raise your hand and that'll notify us. Comments that are relevant to the topic at hand in the chat box will also be read. However, we do encourage you, if you do plan on speaking, do not utilize the chat and say the same thing. Let's try to be concise since we are behind time. Either raise your hand or utilize the chat function. Public comments of a person's character will not be heard. You will be asked to stop by the chairperson if it continues. You may also be removed from the meeting. Also, if you are participating in person, which I don't think we have any public members in person, but if you go to the end of the table here, we can recognize you to speak. The way we'll take comments is it'll be committee members first that are here in person, then it'll be committee members that are virtual. Then we can move on to public that is in person, and then public who are not in person. I think that about covers it.
Thank you, Brenton. Next, we'll have our approval of the July meeting summary. For those who are in person, it's in our packet, and for those who are virtually, it is online on the DD Council website.
Be by unanimous consent.
Do we have any objections to approving the minutes from the July meeting? Look at the chat. Okay. There's no objections, so therefore we'll approve the minutes from the July Act 378 meeting by unanimous consent.
One thing real quick, I saw the comment that Vivian was hearing overlapping voices. Not sure what that would be from, but it does remind me, if you were here in person, just remember that the mics are on the table and they're always live. So keep that in mind when you're shuffling your papers or if you're having any side chatter. Definitely, if you need to have a conversation about something that's not related, you want to step away from the table because we can hear it and you might not want us to. But also just keep in mind any wrappers from the candies or your papers, they can pick up that. So try to be cautious when you're doing those things.
The temptation that the DD Council staff has put in front of us that are.
We're going to try to make it really difficult for you to participate in this meeting. The live microphones and everything.
Thank you, Britton. Next, we will have the Office for Citizens with Developmental Disabilities report by Anya Murphy and Julie Hagan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
It's good to see you all again. Okay, well, we'll start with the fiscal year 22 final total expenditures. There's always quite a bit of a lot of information to show on here, but the final totals are always my favorite because there's no question about it not being the end of the quarter, or there being some information we don't know. But this is it. This is the final expenditure report for the fiscal year 22, which ended June 30th, 2022.
Wow.
If you want to take a look at the percentage expended, you'll see that everybody met the 95%. That is the performance indicator expectation for the individual and family support. Giving you guys an opportunity to take a look at the numbers. A total of 3,499 individuals were served in the state of Louisiana with the individual and family support program. And the cumulative percentage expended is 99%. Does anybody have any questions about the individual and family support program?
Tanya, we have at least a few new members on the DD Council who are here for the meeting, and I just wanted to share with them, if you have any questions, there's no questions that you can't ask, or that this is a pretty complex committee, I think, and to be able to understand. So I ask the same question year after year, so it's okay. And sometimes it's good to revisit and rethink about something that was in the past. Maybe we determined, those of us who've been around a while, but it's good to revisit and maybe rethink about some of this. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, and I'm glad that you guys are participating in this committee. Okay, Vice Chairman Bank, and then Jill Eagley after Ms. Bank.
And thank you, Ms. Zola, for recognizing me. So I have a question upon the individual family support, where it has the 38,453 that's in the red by the NSHSD. Okay, why are they in the red with this one? I mean, I ask that all the time. It's because they're always in such a significant red.
Yeah, the red means that they overspent their budget.
Okay, so
they,
with that question being answered, if they overspend their budget, does that mean that they're reaching more people?
well, let me describe it to you this way. Many of the agreements that each LGE makes with the families, like for example, if it's for personal care attendant services, they'll do a contract maybe or an agreement for the full year for like $5,000. And then the families will utilize 500 this month, 700 this month, and they use it for the whole fiscal year. Many times families don't spend their full contract. And so I know that when I was supervising the individual and family support, when I worked at an LGE, I would over obligate the amount of money that I had available to me to make sure that I spent at least 95%, because there were some families that would leave money on the board. So it looks like Northwest Louisiana over obligated, but their family spent the money. So they went over their budget. I would say what it means to me is everybody spent their agreements and they were able to help a few extra people. And the good thing about some of the LGEs funneling their money through the LFS, LCS, if you look at the columns, one of them says budgeted at LGE and one of them says budgeted through LFS, LCS.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Region 7, Northwest Louisiana Human Services District budgets all their money through LFS. And that gives them a little bit of wiggle room. So LFS will pay that extra. If they go a little over the budget, they paid it. So it's kind of a surprise. And I'm sure the LGEs were having a little bit of a heart attack when they over budgeted, and then the people actually spent it all. But luckily LFS will cover that. I don't think they encourage them to go over their budget, but it's covered. So they spent their budget and then some.
Okay, cool. And just like Ms. Polozola was saying earlier, we do have new members on here. So I know we're all used to just using our acronyms and just using the LRS. And say, can we just state the full thing just in case people that are online, you know, they don't know what that is or whatever. So just, and I know the budget reports and the actual report just have the initials, but just for the people that's new, because we do have some new people, can y'all just, you know, just state the whole acronym for the things, if y'all don't mind?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I try to do that all the time, but I always, find myself forgetting. But LGE stands for Local Governing Entity, was just another term that we use when we refer to all 10 of the human service districts and authorities across the state. The first column there says LGE, and then it lists their actual name: Metropolitan Human Services District, Capital Area Human Services District, etc. And then the budgeted through LFS, I believe that stands for Louisiana Family Services. And then LCS is the same company. And I think Louisiana Clinical Services, but it's the same company, and it's just goes by LFS with the Individual and Family Support Program, Louisiana Family Services.
Thank you.
And just for clarification on the LGE, if you know your LD8, the Louisiana Department of Health regions, the order that they're listed, well, that's their names, it's region 1 through 10 on the first column. So if you know it in that way, you can look at it in that way. And then Jill.
So Ms. Tanya Murphy, what does individual family support mean? Just curious.
So in the Act 378 program, there are 2 different programs that spend that money, that Act 378 money. One is the Individual and Family Support Program, and the other is the Flexible Family Fund Program. Individual and Family, go ahead.
There are services for the Office of Citizens of Developmental Disabilities, services for the special need population every year.
That's correct.
I just wondered, like in the near future, next year or the year after, based on the new governor, are we going to be stabilized with the legislative after 24 with passing rates for providers and DSPs? Because I'm on the board for the ARCA-GNO and I represent the DD Council, but are things ever going to level out? Because I pray to God and I hope that miracle happens.
Thanks for your statement, Jill. I hope it does as well. I don't really have the answer for you about that.
Because I know that with the end of COVID, the turnout with the ARCA-GNO is like insane. I mean, we getting honest, it's like hard to find honest staffing, and staffing are leaving and groups are not coming back. And it's just, I'm trying to make the change, and Lord knows when things are ever level out with the funding in the country and in the state of Louisiana.
Thanks,
But I
Jill.
appreciate you telling me what it means, and thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Jill, any other questions about the individual and family support funds by council members, or any other questions?
Okay, well, we can move on to the Flexible Family Fund section of the report then. The Flexible Family Fund is a monthly stipend that we provide to families who have children in their home who have severe disabilities. If they meet the severity criteria, they get $258 per month, which comes out to $3,096 per year. this program is a lot easier to budget out because you know exactly how much is going out every month and exactly how much the families are going to get. And as long as you've got your slots all filled, you generally spend 100%, which you can see all but one of the LGEs did. And the only reason that one hit 99% is because they weren't able to get that one slot filled. And so some of the money didn't go out. But I know that they are working to fill all the slots. Any questions about the flexible family fund?
And Tanya, just to recap from a discussion that we've had at previous meetings when we discussed about, you know, why not having all of the slots filled, that sometimes there's a processing issue to determine, you know, there is an empty slot, and getting the people processed to ensure they still qualify, ensure they can reach out to the next person on the list. And sometimes they may have to go through the process of reaching out to several people going down the list, and that takes some time. So just wanted
That's
to
right.
remember that. But it looks like they're not really having that big problem, at least didn't have it during this past fiscal year.
Right. They work very hard to make sure that they anticipate when a slot is going to come open. And that happens when a child reaches age 18. So they know when a child's going to reach 18, they know when those slots are going to come open. And so they start sending out the letters to the next people on the list and try to make sure that they get the next, you know, get somebody determined to meet the criteria so that they can start their agreement right when the other person ages out. They do a really, really good job of that.
Thanks, Tanya. Any other questions on this?
I have a question. I don't know, it might be more of a question for Julie, Tanya, but so the $258 a month, I mean, that's a really old number. It's based on some really old data. Has the department over the years ever thought about trying to increase that amount to be a little bit more relevant to what folks are getting today? I don't know if you need to go into the historical of how you came up with the 258, but it's a very old number. And so I was just wondering if the department's ever considered trying to get more money for this program.
No, that's not, this is Julie. That's not anything that's not anything that's come up during budget or anything. I don't know that it may be that if we were asked to, you know, we could consider it. I think we would definitely though need to have additional funds tied to that, because my concern is if you go up on the amount, but then there's no additional funds, then you're serving fewer people. And so
Right.
It would have to, in my mind, you would have to have the commensurate, you know, budget asked to be able to give to the LGEs to be able to make that change. So,
Good to know. Thank you.
not opposed, just saying we would need, you know.
Yeah, I had in my head, like, if there was more money available, if more money could be requested, if that was ever a conversation. I know the council has talked about doing some work around it years ago, and then it just kind of fell off, but I was just curious. A few people have brought it up prior to this meeting, so I just wanted to put that out there in the realm of advocacy.
Hey, Bambi, one of our new council members has his hands.
Oh, I'm sorry, Eric Taylor.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Does that affect if a person have the SSI?
The stipend, the $258.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know, Tanya, do you know the answer to that? Does that get counted as an
It doesn't,
asset or something that would potentially impact SSI? I don't think so, but.
no. The $258 is considered a cost reimbursement for the extraordinary cost of having a child in the home with a severe disability. And so it's not considered income.
So I have one more question. If you know somebody, how do they sign up for it?
You go through the local governing entity is or the agency. So it depends on where you live. We have 10 and you can find it. I can send folks a link, or there's a link on our webpage for the Office for Citizens with Developmental Disability. Depending on what parish you're in, there's, you know, all but one serve multiple parishes. And so you would go apply through that local governing entity in your region.
Oh, okay.
But it is for family, it's for children 18 and under. So
And I believe typically if someone, because this is for children, and so it's typically if someone qualifies, goes through that human service district, they should be asked, they want to be put on the waiver list, and then they'll get us the sunscreen and see if they get a waiver. But they also should be asked if they want to be put on this list for flexible family funds. I think that's typically the process, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's usually the way people enter and get on that list. And then when the slot comes available, that person would, that child would, their family would receive that fund each month once that slot comes available. Any other questions about the flexible family funds? Okay.
All right, the total final expenditures for Act 73.
How about that part? 1 second.
Page 2. There it is. In this report, I combined, the first column shows the total amount of state general funds that have been, that has been given to each of the LGEs for that fiscal year. The second column does the math and lets you know what 9% of that total state general fund is. And then each LGE has been required by Act 73 to budget 9% of their state general funds towards Act 73 or towards Act 378 funding or services for people with developmental disabilities. So I combine however much they tell me that they budget for their IFS and FFF programs combined, which needs to equal that 9%. And then the next column shows how much they actually did spend totally in a combined IFS FFF number. And then the final column does the math for you and lets you know how much of the 9% was spent. So they are supposed to spend 98%. And you can see by the list there, many of the LGEs exceed the 9%. Statewide, they spent 120% of the 9%. There's a couple of LGEs that were close, 98 and 99%, but everybody spent what was required. Are there any questions about the Act 73?
Oh, Mr. Hannah.
Nicole Banks?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the first region, the MSHD, SD, I'm sorry, that's at 93%, right?
No, it's 100%.
Oh, okay, wait, I'm sorry. I was looking at the other one from the last time. Okay. Okay, never mind. I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong report.
Okay.
Any other questions about the Act 73 compliance report?
There are no chats or hands raised.
Okay. Q1. So in October, we also report the first quarter expenditures for fiscal year, the next fiscal year, which is now fiscal year 23. What we expect to see is maybe around 25% because it's divided into quarters. And so you would think that it would be 25 and then 50 and then 75 and then 100. Keep in mind that this report is not showing all of the expenditures for the first quarter because the report is requested prior to them receiving all of the expenditures. So the total statewide is at 14%. And each time I give one of those reports, I always say, I know it looks a little low in some of the regions or some of the LGEs, but they have obligated the money and they are assisting individuals and they will spend all of it. It's just a little bit low for this first quarter report because, you know, they haven't gotten all of their invoices yet for the first quarter, and they're just getting started making these agreements. So it looks a little low, but I have no doubt they will spend all the money. Any questions for this?
Nicole Banks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'm just looking at it a whole totality. So cumulative serve, we have 1,800 people being served roundabout, but we have 2,000 on the waiting list. How? I mean, I know it's just the first quarter, but how do we get that number down? The ones that's on the waiting list is budget. Does funding has to increase or?
Where is the 2,000 waiting list that you're seeing?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. We haven't got to that part yet.
Oh, it must be over on Flexible Family Fund.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I went ahead. I'm
Okay.
sorry. I went ahead.
Now that's okay. That's okay. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Yeah. So do I just ask it later or?
Oh, well, I can answer it now. You know, they have individuals on the waiting list and they have a certain number of slots that they keep filled. And so they can't get to those names on the waiting list until they have slots that open up. There's a lot of individuals that are on the waiting list that have a qualifying condition to get on the waiting list, but that once their name is reached on the list might not necessarily meet the severity screening. So they have to go through quite a few. I mean, I don't know. I guess there would have to be more money from the legislature to get rid of the whole waiting list. But they do work through that waiting list quite pretty quickly.
Okay. I was just wondering, like, what was the process? Because right now, you know, we have the amount served versus the amount on the waiting list is just significant. That to me, that's all. Even if you're saying that they probably need more money, then okay. Would they need more money in a specific category or just more money in the family flexible funds? I'm sorry, the flexible family funds.
No, that's okay. I understand what you're saying. I guess the LGEs would have to receive more state general funds so that they could put more towards the flexible family fund.
Okay.
You want me to expand on that?
Yeah, can you? Thank you.
Yeah, so and this is Julie. So the the last report Tanya gave, the LGEs do get a certain amount of state general fund. It is up to them in their budget to kind of determine how much they'll allocate towards the family flexible fund and the individual and family support dollars. And so that's why a few years ago, the DD Council advocated for and got the requirement that you take their total budget, the total state general funds they get, and at least 9% of those has to be budgeted to these two programs. So the report kind of shows that. So because they're meeting that, in order to serve more people through that program, they would either have to find their own state general fund dollars within their budget that would go beyond the 9% to dedicate to that, or, which might be difficult, would be difficult, that, asking to kind of find that money, or we would have to go to the legislature and say that we would like to have additional state general fund dollars allocated to the LGEs. And when you have the budget, you can do certain things we call line items, which means that it's not like we're giving you money and saying, here, do what you want with it. You can potentially have a line item in the budget and it says, we're going to give whatever we could calculate how much it would cost us additional state general fund dollars to give all of the people on the waiting list the stipend or the family flexible fund. So you would have to go to the legislature and say, we need this much more money in state general fund, because that's what pays for this program is our state general fund dollars. And that you would allocate it to the LGEs, but say, hey, LGE, you have to use it for this program. So there is the ability to put that specifically in the budget, but really to, that would be, I think to ask them to find it in their budget might be difficult because they've got other, things that they have to cover. So I would think in order to really address it, we would have to go ask for that additional state general fund so we could support them. But then to make sure that it went to that, you could potentially ask for that in the budget. Does that help explain it a little better?
Yes, ma'am. It does clear it up to, just to know the process of what has to happen and, where we are currently in the process. So yeah, it does clear it up a little bit better. Thank you.
Any other questions?
There's one in the chat.
Yes, from Brooke Stewart. They're still working on serving 2019 applicants. What is the average time on the waiting list for flexible family funds?
Yeah, each LGE handles their own waiting list. So it's anywhere between 1 and 3 years.
Any other questions?
No, ma'am, not in the chat.
Okay, then you can move on.
So just to talk a little bit more about Flexible Family Fund, you can see that the expended year to date across the board is 25%. And I think I mentioned that before in the final report that because it's a set amount, they can meet that 25, 50, 75, 100% almost exactly.
Okay.
So Act 73 first quarter. So this is where we find out for this fiscal year now, fiscal year 23, the total state general fund. It's going to be similar to what it was for last year. You can compare. The amounts might be different in a little bit different. And then the 9% that they need to budget, how much they've actually budgeted towards these two programs. And then for the first quarter, how much they've spent combined. And if we're looking for that 25%, we're very close to the 9% being spent. 25% of the 9%, sorry. But again, they haven't gotten all of their invoices yet for the full first quarter. So this is missing about a month of how much they will actually have spent for the first quarter.
So Tanya, South Central Louisiana Human Service Authority and Acadian Area Human Service Authority doesn't seem that they. And Florida parishes, doesn't seem they've budgeted the 9%. So what happens there?
Yeah, typically I would look and see how much they've budgeted once I get this information, and I just send them a message and just say, you haven't budgeted your 9%, and then see it that they alter the amount that they budget. It's up to the LGEs to do that, and I do remind them.
But it's not really up to them because by law, they're required to do it. I mean, they're required.
Right, it's up to them to comply.
And
Right.
so I guess my concern is looking at this, so these three regions, which Acadiana exceeded for the fiscal year 2022, but South Central and Florida parishes both were below spending the 9%, even though it was, Montgomery, Florida parishes, I think for 2022 was 10,000, but like South Central was 30 something thousand below spending the 9% goal. And so now we see this again. And so that kind of throws up some red flags for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I will be reaching out to those LGEs and notifying them that their state general fund amount changed, that their 9% is this amount, that they need to be budgeting at least that much. And I usually also throw in there that I recommend that they actually budget more so that they can reach, because the goal is to spend 100% of that 9% amount of money. So they really should be budgeting a little bit more. And I will be notifying them about this.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Julie?
This is Julie. Tanya, can you please ask those three regions for the January Act 378 subcommittee meeting to provide you with specific information that can be shared with the committee, but since that was noted. You can
Absolutely.
by that. Thank you.
And is there a hand? Let's see, someone's hand raised.
Yes, Miss Kathy Dwyer has her hand raised.
Okay, Kathy, can be recognized?
Thank you, Bambi. In terms of the LGEs complying with Act 73, what are the consequences if they don't?
Tanya, can you answer that?
I think we've spoken before about possibly requiring a corrective action plan.
Okay, and so like when you notify them, I'm assuming then they'll go back to applications they've received and fund more, or do you know what they typically do to bring their amount up to the minimum 9% required?
Yeah, this has happened a couple of times in the past. And whenever I let the executive director and the DD director know, they just put more money into the budget so that they reach that 9%. Up to this point, once I've notified them that they aren't in compliance with the Act 73, they've all come into compliance after I've notified them.
Okay, so you do monitor to see when they do come into compliance.
Yes.
And is there a certain amount of time frame that they have to do that, or that really hasn't been an issue because they've been pretty responsive?
Yeah, by the time I get the Q2 report, it's always been corrected.
Okay. Okay, and just by chance, not that there ever will be, but just by chance, let's say somewhere down the road an LGE doesn't comply. When there's a corrective action plan, never mind, forget that question. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, Julie. So this is Julie again. So if we're what ifing, then what we would need to do, Tanya and I would work together to present that to the department. And we would run that through, budget, and we would identify with budget and with legal what the appropriate actions are based on the requirements in law. So we haven't had to do that before. But if we did, then that would be upon the department to escalate it, to review with our legal team to determine what the appropriate actions would be. And I just don't remember Act 73 enough to know if there were specific fines or sanctions or things like that were included or not. So we would need to pull that legislation, look for that, and then, look at if it's not in there, then there are some other avenues. So we would have to look at what the appropriate action would be. Normally we do as Tanya said, before we take any fines or sanctions, we do typically offer an opportunity to correct it through a corrective action plan. And then, you know, from there, you then take a look at, well, does it continue or did it repair? But that would be incumbent upon the department. Since that is the state general fund dollars run through the department, to be able to take a look at that and determine the appropriate actions.
Great. That was very helpful. Thank you, Julie.
Okay.
You read my mind.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I was thinking the same thing. I couldn't remember the specific wording of Act 73 to find out, but that we would have to look it up. So, yeah.
And I saw Melinda Elliott has her hand raised. You recognized?
Thank you, Bambi. So if I understand the discussion correctly, and of course I might not, last year, they either didn't allocate 9%, some of them either didn't allocate 9% or didn't spend 9%. But there would have been no corrective action plan or this year because it's a new year. I mean, last year, if they had allocated under the 9% last year, then of course, I'm assuming that you told them and that they corrected it, but they still spent less. So I guess I'm a little confused.
So
On the final report that I'm sorry?
Go ahead, Tanya.
On the final report, they spent, all of the LGE spent what was required. I believe 98% is the required goal for them to spend. We want them to spend 100 of it, but they're held to 98%.
Can I follow up?
Yes, ma'am.
So I thought I understood that not all of the LGEs had spent the 9%. Did I misunderstand that?
So there's two reports in relation to the 9% that are included. There's one that is the final for fiscal year 22, which runs July 1st of 2021 through June 30th of 2022. So at the end of the fiscal year, all of them did spend at least 98% of the 9% state general funds. Then there's a second report in relation to the compliance for this quarter that takes a look at just the first quarter. And so in that report, what we're saying is that at this point, there are, it looks like 3 LGEs that have not indicated in their budget of the full 9% is allocated. So because we're in October right now, there's a chance for them to correct that in their budget and then spend, because they have until June 30th of 2023 to be able to spend that money. So the report we're talking about now is just looking at what happened in the first quarter, which would have been July, August, and September. And so what we'll do is go say to them, those 3, from the report, it's not budgeted. And that way they will have time to correct it and have time to then spend it, because the report we look at is, did they actually not just budget it, but did they actually spend the full 9% at the end of the year? Does that help make it clearer?
I just want Melinda, what I was referencing is the 2 at the end of fiscal year 22 that did not reach the 9% goal. So they got 99% or 98%. So whereas some of the other LGEs were extremely over 9%. So for instance, South Central, they spent about $29,000 less than the 9% goal. And then Florida Parish is about 10% less than, $10,000 less than the 9% goal. And so they were lower, even though they were met the 98%. And then if you look at this year's report, they also currently don't have budgeted 9%. So what I was saying is, so that made me think that that's you know, there's a trend there that they're the lowest LGEs on the final report last year and the current budget this year. So I said it's a red flag that needs to be addressed. And Tanya said that she was going to address it.
Thank y'all so much. I got the mixed up in the last year, this year. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions about this Act 73 report for the first quarter of this fiscal year? Any comments in the chat? Any relevant chats?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Tanya, you next.
So another report that that I send in to DD Council at the end of each fiscal year, which is reported in October, it's a pretty big report that that Brenton helps me put together, and it shows for the individual and family support program, it breaks out every LGE, total requests received, the requests reviewed, the requests that are fully funded, partially funded. It just breaks all of the information down so that you guys can look at the priority level, how many requests were received, how many were funded, and the total of all the agreements in each quarter, I think.
I actually made the report even longer this year, Tanya.
Fantastic.
What I did was normally this page here where it breaks down the particular services that are received and the contracts encumbered spent, you send one over for each LGE. So all I did this year was just compile everything for all of them into one sheet so you could see the total that was spent by the end of the year for everyone. So you'll see their end of year. And so I guess this is page 3 of that particular report. You'll see all of their end of year here. And then on that next page, you'll see the actual totals of, so for all services through your LGs, there were over 5,000 contracts done for over 8.5 million in state general funds. So it just totals up everything that follows the rest of that page. If you're only interested in the actual totals, and then you can go and look at your particular LGE if you're interested in specific. Hopefully that would make it a little bit easier to navigate.
So I just have a question. Whenever you look at each one of them on the second, I guess it'll be actually the third column, because the first column is the region and the priorities. The request, and then you go over to, but then it puts the priorities, and then let's see, request fully funded and request partially funded. And so I guess the difference between that, if you look at it, like the difference between what was reviewed, you have what was fully funded plus what was partially funded. The difference is what, okay, then you look at the request denied. So all of that should total up. Is that correct? Can y'all kind of guide on that? Okay.
Right.
Okay, so if you would just go across and look at add up requests fully funded, partially funded, approval pin, all of those columns all the way down to waiting, you add up all of those, that would equal up to your request reviewed or should?
I think it should. I'm thinking there might be some, let's see.
Yeah, I mean, so you're fully funded, you're partly funded, your denials, that should add up to the request reviewed. Received could potentially be off from what was actually reviewed. We've seen that sometimes, and you can see it here. But the other columns that look at things that were deferred or denied or closed or waiting or things like that may not actually add up across
Okay.
the whole line. Because those might just be a fraction of some of the things that were in there,
Mhm.
of the full request.
And so when I look at, just looking at the request reviewed, like, it seems like it's pretty close to the reviewed, most of the regions have reviewed what the request that they received. I do see a big gap in South Central. They received 511, but only reviewed 436. And the rest of them seem to be within, 0 to 20, but that one seems to be a larger number. That's about 75 that was received but wasn't reviewed. Is there a reason for that, or do we know the
That would be
reason?
under the open request column. Probably your difference there.
But why aren't they?
Oh, I don't know why they're open. I was just,
Yeah, okay, someone, that would make sense. But again, why weren't they reviewed?
I would like to contact them so that they can speak for themselves about that, but I can give you an idea of why sometimes when I was doing IFS, why there were some not reviewed. And that would be because perhaps we only had enough money to pay for priority 1s and 2s and 3s, and we weren't even looking at priority 4s. But like we had talked about before, South Central did have some money left. So I would like to contact them to get that reason why.
Yeah, and this is Julie. They also were so impacted by Ida, it may be that people asked and then weren't able to find them if they were still we still have people evacuated and things like that. So you can find out too since it does look so different, that might also play a factor there.
But if it says request reviewed and it puts by the priorities, then you go over to, if it's open request, and that means how is it put into priorities if it wasn't even reviewed yet?
it may not be.
The requests come in with priority numbers already attributed to them. So when they review, they might look at the information, but it's not officially reviewed until it goes to the IFS committee.
So who puts a priority on it?
A support coordinator will put a priority on it if they get their request from support coordinator, or the community service professional at the LGE who puts the packet together and works with the family determines the priority. So it comes to the committee with a priority already established.
And what does the committee do?
The committee makes a recommendation of, once they decide to review it, once it is brought to the committee can recommend a change of priority. They can recommend to fund it, partially fund it, deny it. They can make recommendations for all of the outcomes.
Okay. I see Kathy Dwyer has her hand raised.
Thank you, Bambi. It's supposed to be, you're saying it's supposed to be prioritized before going to the committee, because I'm on the committee in Region 10 and there are a few that we get that are not prioritized. And I'll point it out to them, but I don't get responses. So if that sometimes is important, although sometimes we can tell by what the request is as to how important, or the priority. But I will note that we get some that aren't prioritized. And we get a lot that don't have complete information. So if there's some way to make sure they review that all the information is correct, because it would speed up the approval process instead of having to constantly send it back for more information.
Okay, thank you for that,
So,
Kathy.
thanks.
Do we have any other questions about this report that will be?
There are no hands raised or comments in the chat.
Ken, you can go to your next report.
I mean, I think that's it for me.
That is it.
What about the by services? We didn't look at the part of it.
Oh, I mean, that was one big report. So,
Okay.
okay.
Well, so I was thinking that was another, so there's another section of it. So it's reports by service.
Right, right. I like this report. It breaks it down by what was actually purchased, what service was actually purchased for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
This is a report that I worked on a lot with DD Council, and because we used to have a lot in I'm looking at Metropolitan and they have 569 in other, so I'm gonna have to go back to them and find out what's going on, because we try to make sure we added individual items that were descriptive enough so that we didn't have to have so many in other, so that we could really get a good idea of what was purchased, but I'm gonna make a note of that.
Yeah, because we still have over 1,000, well, over 1,200 really that are listed as other.
And so I remember this discussion, and it led to last year, and it led to questioning about why some regions had really high cost in some areas, and some that didn't. And so first one that caught my eye was the diapers, disposable undergarments, and incontinence supplies, which is recommended as a advocacy item from our executive committee. So I think that's important to everyone. But if you look across, you can see where many of our districts are over 100 to 200 $1,000 in providing for those supplies. But then you have a region like Acadiana that only has 2,000. And just we had talked about last time to see from these regions where we saw not discrepancies in a bad way, but just differences, to figure out what they're doing to have those differences.
Right,
So-
and I met with all of the LGEs last year to have a discussion across the board to find out why some were different. And then I reported back to the council that like Acadiana, for example, has a resource in their region that donates. And when donates the diapers. And so that resource was shared with all the other LGEs so that they could maybe try to find that in their region as well. And that's quite typical of why the different LGEs spend on different things. It's the specific need in their LGE and the specific request for services that they receive that the people in their region need. So that's why we created LGEs in the first place, was so that they could tailor their services for their region and their specific need. And so Acadiana has found a resource in their area. And that's why their diapers specifically request is lower than the others.
Okay, and I remember last year our conversation also was a concern, was that sometimes a potential issue is that the requests are kind of like pushed to like, this is what we do. And so you will get more requests about certain things in one region, and just to make sure that there wasn't like in certain regions, like people weren't able to access certain types of services because it was just like maybe thought by the public that that's not something that's offered, or that there was some type of way of diverting those requests to certain things or not to certain things. And so I remember there was a lot of dialogue about that. And one of them was like about vocational and employment services. And so when I look across there, I can see like there's some substantial amounts in some of our regions. And then you could look like MCAL has 0. Central Louisiana only has 10,000 I'm talking about the encumbered amount. And so do we have any information about that?
About the vocational specifically,
Yeah,
or, I mean, it's what's available in each region is, you know, what they, I don't think that the LGEs are putting the word out that, you know, we're only going to fund this or this, so that's all you should request. I mean, I would have to ask each, I don't know, I'm trying to explain it in a way that makes sense, because it makes sense to me, and it doesn't seem like there's anything nefarious or that anything going on that needs to be changed. But I guess I'm trying to find out from you what you're seeing that's concerning.
so, I mean, does nobody in Region 5 need employment services? Or the opposite end of it is that, or in other regions, are we diverting people to employment services, which I understand it to be typically sheltered employment? And so, or is MCAL doing a great job putting people in competitive integrated employment and not having to use these services, and our other regions are still heavily dependent on the sheltered environments? Or is MCAL, the citizens there aren't, or are they just not getting any employment service? I don't know what to make of it, but I know that our people aren't that different, you know, across the state. I realize that there's different resources and that type of thing. So I guess I would just, you know, want to know like what is happening in those regions.
I mean, I could ask Imperial Calcasieu, but I could venture to guess that their vocational workshops were closed because of the hurricane damage.
Okay.
And that might have a lot to do with why they didn't fund anything for this fiscal year.
Okay, Melinda? Melinda Elliott has her hand raised.
Thank you, Bambi. I was just typing. I didn't have the microphone to click on. So I think that in this instance, Tanya is correct. I don't think that we've had any workshop type arrangement open up. None, zero. So there's not a whole lot going on. I am still concerned that it seems like MCAL has such a low number of requests in general compared to the other regions, because there are certainly people here needing, and I even know, because I'm on the rack, that our MCAL put money into IFS to keep up with the need. So maybe they're helping deeply with some people, and that's why there's not as many requests. I don't know. Just my 2 cents.
Any other questions? Thank you, Melinda. Any other questions about this report?
Yeah.
Oh,
So, Bambi, what happened if they, I don't know if this got something, what happened if they don't use this funding? If y'all asking them to use the funding, or what happened if the funding stay there?
I know Tanya or Julie, do y'all want to answer that question?
If the funding is not,
Use?
If it's
What?
not used.
By the individual or by the LGE?
By the LGE.
Okay.
so right now the report is showing that they are they're spending most of what they budget for.
Yes, ma'am.
But that amount that's not, then they, well, I mean, the majority of them are using it. I think that even the amounts of the 98% and the 99% are minimal. They may use it in other areas within the LG if for that small amount, but, it, in state government, it's not, we don't usually spend the exact amount that we budget. There's usually some give and take in there. And I think that's why they kind of put it at the 98%. We'd like for them to spend over, but there's usually I don't know that we ever land exactly, like, unless it's a program kind of more like the Flexible Family Fund where it's more predictable, but most things are not. So it may be used in other parts of the LGE, but in general, if for state government, if we have money that's allocated to us that's not used, it goes kind of back into just a pot of money because you have to spend, your budget goes just every year. So if you don't spend it all, then it goes kind of in, we jokingly call it the greater good. It just kind of goes into some big pot, all state agencies, if there's money left over. So we try hard to get it as close as we can, but we also have to be careful to make sure we don't go over because we're in much bigger trouble if we go over. So it either is used potentially that small amount within the LGE, or it would be given back to go back to the treasury because whatever's left goes back to the treasury at the end of the year. Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. So, y'all don't transfer it to somebody else that needs it and.
So I think that's part of why the council looks at this kind of throughout the year and through the quarter, and so do each of the LGEs. So like if somebody maybe needed something and then they didn't use it, then there's always kind of a list of folks who need things. And so they then look at, how they might. So the individual and family support is not a stipend. That's just kind of, there's a bucket of money. And this report shows all the different things that it's spent on based on the report. So for example, we have a lot of folks who maybe ask for home modifications or help with modifying their home if they need like maybe a bath or something. Well, the cost of that you might ask for one amount and that amount might be more or less. And so then you have to constantly kind of adjust within the budget that way. But yes, it absolutely, they take a look at what money is left to be able to look at helping as many people as they can within that pot of money. And they adjust that throughout the year based on what's been spent.
And we're short on time. I know we're over schedule. And I just want to say my questions are not any indication of anything that I think that's not going right at our with our DD offices, our LGEs. The contrary, they are always very supportive at any of the LGEs. And I feel confident as we had Kathy and Melinda expressing that they serve on those review committees. And I know we have other great people that serve on those review committees, and maybe my concerns are unwarranted. I just wanted to, I want to see that we're having equity and accessibility of all the things that are needed for all our people across the state. So that's where that line of questioning comes from. And do we have someone who had their hands raised? I thought I might have seen that at the bottom of the screen. Oh, two participants with their hands raised.
Yes,
Who are
Miss
they?
Kathy Dwyer and Karonda Corley.
Okay, Kathy and then Karonda.
Thank you, Bambi. If I can make one suggestion to OCDD that maybe they could share with the LGE, something I had made a suggestion to our LGE, but if other LGEs are doing the same thing, it might help with their budgeting, especially when they get closer to the end of the year. I know we get requests every now and then for PCA services, particularly when a family is in the process of applying for a waiver. And typically, at least with our LGE, they do a contract with the family for those hours for a year. What typically, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it takes a year for a waiver to be approved. I would say 6 months might be a fair timeline, if not less. So I would suggest instead of the LGEs obligating a full year's worth of PCA funds, so to speak, to a family, they do contracts for 6 months. That way they have other funds freed up for other needs. You know, if OCDD feels it could be less, then, you know, y'all can make a judgment call on that. But often we would see requests come in for a full year, especially when the request is submitted at the beginning of the fiscal year. And we know they're not going to be using those PCA services for that long, but it's tying up that funds in the projected budget, so to speak. So that's just a suggestion I would suggest across the board if others are operating the same way.
And Kathy, I think that's a good point. Like I look at Acadiana Human Service District, and it looks like they have 61 contracts for PCA. Is that right? And they're spending encumbered 626,000. I mean, that's $100,000 per person. Like, why aren't those people getting waivers if we're spending $100,000? That's more than a waiver. And so those are the type of questions that I would ask, like, should these people be getting waivers? Is it a short term, you know, if it's a 6 months because the caregiver's in the hospital or something, that's one thing. But if it's this amount, that's questionable.
Well, and I don't know about the other LGEs. I can only respond to what we do on our review committee. The first thing we ask for is whether or not they've started the waiver application process. On the request form itself, it's supposed to be checked off as to whether or not they have a waiver, and sometimes it's not checked off at all. So that's my first question. Do they have a waiver? If not, where are they in the application process? You know, and sometimes we will then fund it or just say, you know, we'll go ahead and approve the PCA request with the condition that they apply for a waiver, you know, because you don't want to tie up those funds. Now, you know, and we do that condition because we know they're going to need those PCA services, and we know it's going to take a few months to get the waiver in place if they do meet the requirements and you know, get the SUN score 4 or 5, 3 or 4, sorry. But there are some cases when they don't have a waiver, like even with the SUNs, we might suggest they request a review or reassessment for the SUNs if they are needing that much PCA. Or sometimes they're waiting for like an EPDST application to be approved through Medicaid, you know, where they would receive some of those hours, but at least that's what happens with Region 10.
Thank you, Kathy. And I just want to correct my poor math. It's not 100,000, 10,000. It would be 10,000 per person, but still that's a lot of per person. And maybe some people are getting more than 10,000. So that's just something to look at. Okay, I think we had, who am I supposed to go to first? Should I go to our council members first? And then, because I called
Yeah, it'll be the committee first.
Okay, so then, I'm sorry, Jill, and then I think, did Karonda have her after that? Yeah, she did. Okay, so Jill, go ahead, and then we'll.
Yeah. What I don't understand is that I'm IDD and I get services through MHSD, but why do you have to be on a waiting list or waiver just to get services? Is it because of the funding? I mean,
So Jill, you shouldn't be on a waiting list. We've changed the system. Like if you're looking for what Medicaid waiver, you should go through the SUN assessment, SUN screening as Kathy just talked about, and based on what number you get on there, it means that whether you'll get an offer at that time or have to wait. So it's based on the needs.
Yeah, because Bambi, I've been knowing you forever. You're a great asset working for the state of Louisiana and everything. It's just like, because being on the Arcagino board, serving this and doing boards and DD Council and Special Olympics, let me ask you this: with the way the funding is in the country, people with disabilities next year, is the services going to ever change? Can it ever be different stuff? Because at the Arcagino, we can't hardly do stuff. We can only do certain outings. We can't really go to a lot of.
Things can change, yes, because things are budgeted every year. And also each provider has to determine how they want to spend their money within what the requirements of their program.
So all the providers, they get their state or government revenue from where Miss Julie Hagan works and Miss Tanya Murphy works, correct?
Probably a lot of them that do the DD services get funding through OCDD. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jill. Now
You're
we
welcome.
have a hand raised from Ms. Karonda Corley.
Great morning, Madam Chair, Ms. Polizzola. Good morning, Mr. Chair for the DD Council, and good morning, everyone else on the committee. I want to piggyback off of what first and foremost, Ms. Polizzola, your comments and stuff are definitely on point. I don't think that you're out of line for the questions that you raised, and what Kathy Dwyer stated is actually correct. In Region 2, we are still posed with a lot of individuals not even knowing that they can actually get a waiver and how to even get a waiver, which is a problem. And I'm talking about the outlying parishes that are really rural: East Feliciana, West Feliciana, Point Capee, in some parts of Livingston Parish. Those individuals do not know how to get waivers, don't know that our DD Council exists. But also we have a staffing issue where we don't have enough staff in our human district to actually deal with the individuals with disabilities right now, in which we're serving, as well as the companies that provide the case management. They're not able to receive the staffing as well. And so I just really hope that this committee would take into consideration how we could actually attract staff to both the human district centers, as well as to the case managing companies, and look at boosting the pay rate for those staff members, so that we could actually be able to disseminate out more information to the individuals in our community, so that they could actually receive these meaningful services, because that is a lot of the problems. And I just wanted to make sure that you knew that that is something that I'm seeing, and even the school systems are not knowing the information about these resources to actually disseminate out to our families as well. And I'm so sorry, I don't have much of a voice, but I am trying to project as loud as I can so that y'all could actually hear me.
Thank you, Ms. Corley. We heard you. Any other comments?
No other comments. Ms. Jill Eagley has her hand raised again.
So why is there such a low turnout with DSPs? I mean, because it's like they say the rates passed, but people at the Arcagino are leaving because there's not enough revenue. I don't understand, Ms. Bambi. You work in Baton Rouge and with the governor and all that, but why isn't the turnout is so down?
So Bambi looked at Julie, so that Julie, Jill, I think if any of us could figure that out, we could be millionaires, because it is really it's a crisis across the nation. And there are a lot of people right now trying to figure out why there is such a shortage and why so many people are leaving. And what can we, and by we, I mean collectively, we, like all of us, what can all of us do to really address what we know is a huge problem? There's recently been some articles that have come out. We in Louisiana do participate in something called the Staff Stability Survey. There's actually a national survey now that's trying to take a look at things like, do we offer benefits, or what are packages? What is the average salary, and to be able to kind of compare across states. So they're starting to try to pull together information like that will help give us research. I know at the federal level, that, and I'll be in DC next month, and I know that this is a big topic at the conference that I'm going to.
Wow.
They're looking at changes we need to make at the federal level, and then the states need to look at changes we need to make at the state level. But to answer the question as to why, I think there's a lot of people we need to know the why, so we know what we can do to change it. And I think because the rates were low and the pay was low, that is one factor. But now that we've got the pay is up, that's not the only thing. And I've been saying that for a long time. Like we definitely need to get the pay up, but I think that alone isn't going to help us have a qualified, adequate number of direct support professionals. And so I think that there's a lot of things we have to do. And if we could get at the why or the root cause of it, then I think it would help us. I think right now we're just all kind of trying to throw darts at the wall. Well, maybe it's this, let's do this. Maybe it's this, let's do this. So we have a lot of work to do to really figure out how do we do that, and what do we need to change to make a
And Ms.
difference.
Julie, I appreciate your leadership, even the ARCA Geno's executive director, and like ARCA Louisiana, ARCA Baton Rouge, Ms. Kelly works, everybody's trying to embrace this in a calm way and pray to God, because when you look at people with disabilities who aren't working and who just get under, I don't know, 700 SSI, they can't even buy stuff. They can't even go on a trip. I mean, we got to change the way society thinks about the DD Council and all the people that they represent. It's so disheartening to me. I try to make change, but it's like, what can you do?
Thanks, Jill. And
You're
I
welcome.
see Kelly Monroe has her hand raised, and next she'll be up on the agenda. So we'll just move right into her report after she makes her comment about this.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, it's really not about the money and the rate of pay. We have a local chapter that I was talking to yesterday who was saying that she pays her DSP $16 an hour and she can't keep them. And it's, a lot of businesses are paying $15 to $17 an hour. And this job is hard. It's not easy, and you can't, people have to love what they do to be a DSP. You can't just say, I need a job and go get a job being a DSP. It's a hard job. It's very difficult. And we haven't figured out how, because we do have chapters that are paying everywhere between $12.50 an hour to $16 an hour. And we can't hold on to any staff. We hire 10 and we lose 10. It's the strangest thing. So I think a lot of it has to do is a lot of the baby boomers are retiring, and there's a lot more positions to be filled than what we thought there were, also. So there's not as many people in the workforce that was in the workforce before, and that's a big deal too. So anyway, for what it's worth.
Thank you, Kelly. And it's going to move on, but Nicole Banks, if you can make a quick comment because we're really behind schedule.
Yeah, I'll just make a real quick comment. The DSP workers has always been a high turnover rate because of the kind of job that it is. So you're right, Kelly. A person would have to love what they do when they go into that field because of the intensity of and everything that goes along with it. So, and then it's very hard. We already did a rate increase, and I know it's a little hard to combat that whole the turnover rate with the DSP workers, even with raising the pay.
Thanks, Nicole. And thanks, Tanya, for the OCDD report. And we will now move on to our Office of Aging and Adult Service report by the ARC of Louisiana.
Ms. Bamber, we do have one comment from Kathy Dwyer. Would you like for me to read it prior
Sure.
to, okay. Regarding DSP staff shortages, I think we have to remember that hundreds of thousands of people died from COVID. The baby boomer generation is retiring and business have continued with virtual offices, making those jobs more attractive. And of course, the DSP pay is not competitive. National average is $14 plus an hour, plus many DSP jobs don't have fringe benefits.
Thank you, Kathy. All good points. Appreciate it. Now we'll have Kelly do the ARC of Louisiana report.
Okay. Are you putting it on the screen?
Yeah, I was just gonna say before you started, Kelly, just
Yep.
for committee members and public to know, we've got 10 minutes to cover about an hour's worth of agenda. So please make sure that your comments are germane to what we're talking about and are relevant. Please make them clear and concise if you do have comments.
I'll be super quick. It's all good stuff. And this, we already gave our end of the year report last time. So we're just going to focus on this first quarter. So it shouldn't take too long. But again, this year we started working with 41 individuals. Some of those have changed. So some of the demographics are going to be a little bit different than they were last time. So of the 41 people, there were 13 people who identified as being African-American, 27 as Caucasian, and 1 as Hispanic. Those included 29 males and 12 females. When you're looking at the age range, they range now between the ages of 30 and 91. And within the 9 regions, we have 4 of them in region 1, 9 of them in region 2, 3 in region 3, 1 in region 4, 4 in region 5, 2 in region 6, 10 in region 7, 1 in 8, and then 7 in 9. And then they'll show you the breakdown in the pie chart below. Of the 41 people, everybody receives support coordination. 39 of those individuals received personal care assistance, and 3 of them received utility or rental assistance. No one this quarter received any type of medical stipends, equipment, or supplies, or had any vehicle or home modifications. So far of the direct service amount that we have allocated is and budgeted is $907,528. $528. We spent a total of $150,859.26 in personal care assistance, $1,509 in rental and utility assistance. And like I said before, none in medical or home modifications or medical stipends. So far this quarter, we've spent $152,369.14. If you go to the next page, the waiting list. So on the waiting list, we have 65 individuals who have been placed on the waiting list. The majority of the people reside in region 1, and that's at 18 people in region 1, 8 in region 2, 4 in region 3, 12 in region 4, 2 in region 5, 1 in 6, 4 and 7, 2 and 8, and 14 and 9. That's a total of 65 people. And of those 65 people, 28 of those are African American, 23 are Caucasian, 1 is Hispanic, 1 is Asian Caucasian, and there were 12 unknown who completed the application but did not complete that part. So we're still reaching out to them because they didn't fill out the application completely. And so of those 65, 31 of them were male and 34 of them were female. 56 of those applicants are looking for personal care services. And then 7 of them were looking for home modifications. 5 were looking for medical equipment and supplies. One was looking for transportation. Two, some type of therapy, whether it be physical, speech, or occupational. So what we would need if we wanted to fund all of these, what's estimated we would need would be roughly about $1.2 million. And that is all. Does anybody have any questions about anything? I know I went through it pretty quick, but I'm open to answering any questions you may have.
I don't see any hands raised or chat. So thank you,
You're welcome.
Kelly. Appreciate it.
That was easy.
Yes. So next we have our Office of Behavioral Health report from Dr. Savicki and Dana Foster.
Hello. I will go ahead and go through those nice and quickly as soon as Brenton gets them on screen. Okay. So starting with the end of the year report. Again, this is, the behavioral health version of what Tanya presented. So the consumer care resources is the funding where folks can make individual requests to cover, needs. And then the flexible family funds is, again, the kind of monthly subsidy program. So for consumer care resources, we had, and again, our performance threshold is to have 95% of the allocated funds spent by the end of the year. Only one of the LGEs did not meet that. That's Metropolitan. They have been reporting struggling based on a lot of COVID-related factors in connecting clients to this funding. They have been, we've requested a corrective action plan from them for this particular metric. And I will note that you'll see on the Q1 report that you'll see next, they're actually already on track for this current fiscal year. And so they seem to have, I'm waiting to get their corrective action plan, but whatever they're doing, it seems to be working well, given that for the current fiscal year, they're showing already being on track and allocating that funding. And I think that they, just in informal conversations I've had with them, I think that's a lot of that is connected to resumption of a lot of in-person activities in the New Orleans area. For instance, a lot of kids needing school uniforms. And so they've really been able to connect needed funding to families this time around. On the flexible family funds, much as Tanya said, this is, tends to be, once you get kids into these slots, this tends to be pretty easy for LGs to get out because it is a regular monthly stipend. There was a lot of concern in the last council meeting talking about North Louisiana and that they were really struggling to fill some of their slots. In this end of the year report, they're still showing, at the end of the last fiscal year, they still had quite a few slots that were empty because they had been working through the waiting list, and a lot of the folks on the wait list had already aged out or were no longer eligible. And so they kind of went through their wait list and had to then reach out and recruit additional families to connect to the program. And again, so they will be on a corrective action plan. We've requested that from them. But also similarly, they have already sort of fixed this for that. You'll see in the Q1 report for this fiscal year, they worked through the whole wait list, connected the folks who were eligible to the program, and then recruited additional families because they had already gone through and they'd sort of zeroed out their wait list. And so now that they're reporting in their Q1 report that they do now have all of those slots filled. So that's a quick summary of the year-end report. Any questions?
I'm not gonna see any. You want to do the adult and then start the first quarter?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't we do the year end? Stick to the same year. So again, this is similarly year end report. This is funding that they use for adults. Similarly, most of these funds were expended, and the Metropolitan is under, very slightly under on the adult funding, and so they'll be reporting out to us as well on their plans for use of this funding for the current year. So now we get to the current fiscal year, the quarter end report, and to reiterate what Tanya mentioned as well, these are typically not at 25% because LGEs are reporting out before the whole quarter is over, before they've actually gotten all of the receipts and invoices for spending. And there's also a couple of LGEs who use some federal block grant funding for the same purpose. They have to spend that first. So there are a couple LGEs you're probably familiar with who show zero spent for this fund for a little while into the year while they're using that other funding source, and only later do they start showing expenditure of this particular pot of funding. And then you'll see on the, so yeah, just to note, Metropolitan is already at 23%. So that's really showing that they've really increased their expenditures in this first quarter. And then you'll see on the flexible family fund side that North Louisiana has gotten all of their slots filled. By the end of the quarter, they had gotten all their slots filled. And if there's no questions, we can just do the adult one. And this is just showing the expenditures so far in not quite all of quarter one.
Any questions? Was that it?
That was it. If we don't have any.
Okay, great. Announcement. Do you have any?
Self-determination committee will meet at 1 p.m. and then education committee will meet at 3 p.m. and full council meeting tomorrow at 8:30. Right.
Thanks to everyone who presented. We appreciate it.
And if you have no objections, you can.
No objection.